it's always part of the art world is the experimental part. And that's the exciting part, because those are where the new ideas come from. And that's where new people come from. And so out of schools, in schools, teaching at schools, but when people are younger, you just kind of hit into a world, you start to catch your own ideas, and that's when it gets exciting, when people let go enough to just go with their own instincts, and they don't even know when the hell they're going. And half the time, once they see it, what the hell is that idea? And it's an exciting time always. And so at the 60s and 70s, there happened to be a nice group of people who were doing that. I'm sure there's a group doing it today. They were going to New York for a variety of reasons. There was it was like Paris of the 20s, in that there was not only art students, but there was this whole system there, including a support system that was going to build into the city. Los Angeles has done it in a different way, and they always talked about we'd be the center. We became the center because a place like Cal Arts, we had the most art schools. And so the art students were graduating here and deciding to stay here. And it didn't have any other support, didn't have a magazine. You say, you gotta have a magazine, and you've gotta have collectors, and you've gotta have that number of galleries, and then you become an art center. And that was the traditional way. Los Angeles did it in a non-traditional way. Did it because students, graduating all these students who enjoyed staying here. So there certainly was that kind of a scene at that time, and I'm sure there is now, where there's this cross-fertilization. Cal Arts has really been such an important part in making that happen. It's having a school or a place where that's encouraged, with the people knowing what the other group is doing. You're not just to dance and that's all you're doing, and you have nothing to do with anyone else. And that's one of the advantages of having an art school that's only an art school. It's not a university. It's not even part of all this other things other than the art school. It was a fun zone that had been abandoned, and there was there were watchmen there, and that's all. And they worked it out. The artists were living there, and they were trying to remember who was living there. People like Peter Alexander, Ron Cooper, a bunch of artists were living there. Artists find the place that when they spell it out, that's the place that they can do their work and keep experimenting with ideas that seem crazy. Half the time you walk in and say, what the hell is that? And Joseph Beuys puts up a suit. What the hell was that? Somehow, my partner Jim and I thought he had gone to high school with Wally Berman. He went to high school with him. And Wally, after we were together, we knew Wally really well because of that. Wally was rooming with Sammy Davis Jr. at one time. And really wonderful, odd things happened. And one day he said, because I said, we went to, you guys went to high school. He said, I hate to tell you, I didn't go to high school with you. But what do you mean? You went to high school, you're here at Fairfax? He said, no. He said, I went for 3 weeks, and then I hung out at Herbert's Drive and I sold dope. Well, the parties, I think, in retrospect, the artists have told me that was very important to them. And a couple of them said, I would have left town if you guys weren't doing those things. And occasionally, with the ones we knew the best, we'd jump in a plane, go to Las Vegas, or do something, go do something, maybe, some sort of strange meal or something. So kept some action going. There was so there was that sort of thing. There was a social thing, a great deal. And then a lot of artists were living here. So particularly the word got around with the New York artists live here. We got to call those famous girl, Jill Johnson. Did you ever hear of her? So one day she calls us and says, I understand I'm at a party here and the vibes are terrible. And I understand you guys are nice. Can I come over and stay there? We're part of the Contemporary Art Council. And I later became chair of it. But Robert Disney was in town. We got to know him pretty well. So Gemini, that was where Gemini kicked in, where I got to know a lot of artists in New York. And so we went to this thing he gave, and Bob Rauschenberg was in town. And Bob said, you're going to that? Okay, I'll come over too. So he comes over, and he comes over with Jill Johnson. And they jump in the pool while Roy's giving this talk. And Jill's wearing men's boxer shorts. She kept something on, wearing men's boxer shorts. And they jump in the pool, and then the woman there, who was half crazy anyway, started to yell at Bob, get out of here, because the dog peed in her. His dog, Leica, peed in her bedroom. Get the hell out of here. That's Bob Rauschenberg. Now I'm talking about really early days for Los Angeles. We're talking about, because I was chair in 1972, and this before that, probably 68, 69 or so. So there was a lot going on with people who weren't sure who was what and why, but there were a lot of New York artists coming in and cross-fertilization was going on. Some of that even happened at the parties. I think LACMA was a strange place. It was a place that got no respect. It didn't have the proper curators. Internationally, it didn't mean anything, but Maurice came out and he listened to people. And so if he was listening to the right person, good things happened. And somehow I forget who he might have been listening to during Aram technology, but it was a great idea. But the idea went crazy. It ended up being not what it was supposed to be. It was never supposed to be a show. It wasn't supposed to end up in a product. But it was supposed to be just this cross-fertilization. And it really worked. Richard Serra went up to Fontana, to a steel mill, and I don't know if he changed their lives, but I think he put some idea. And they were always interested at those places because it was boring doing the same thing, even if it was something that was so-called successful. And then, of course, the famous one was the Edwards and Warhol and Terrell and Garrett Air Research, who was doing research, Edwards, for the landing on Mars. What should the environment be like? Changed all their lives. They all had a changing experience from this dealing with each other. And then a World's Fair happened in Osaka, 1968, and all of a sudden they said, well, let's get a show out of this. And having a show at LACMA. It was always fun to be part of these things. So, but the catalog was good because that's what it was about, not the show. But the show, some interesting things happened. Bob Whitman, I got into Bob Whitman, had put together a hologram. No one even knew what a hologram was. So he had done it out in El Toro, whatever the base was in Orange County, Air Force Base, Marine Air Force Base, El Toro. And so we wanted to see it, and we get in a bus. I may have hired a bus, or someone did, or whatever it is, because it was easy to do. You go to Santa Monica. That was the kind of thing you could do, your support system, to go to Santa Monica bus company, and it's pretty cheap to rent a bus. And anyway, we ended up in a bus going to El Toro and going through, this was Vietnam War in the late 60s, and talk about bad lives and feeling of barriers. I mean, it was mind-boggling going into this Marine our friends who were, now we all had full beards. I even had one gentleman in glasses, and that was enough. Well, the instant hookup was Klaus Oldenburg and the Disneys, Walt Disney. That's what came of it. So he came up with his idea that sculpture is like he had been working out here, and he did his soft pieces out here, Lincoln Fabric Company on Lincoln Boulevard in Venice, and his hard plaster pieces in New York, because that's the atmosphere there. This is a different atmosphere, cloth and softness, but his ideal pieces, it was like a human body. So what he really liked was the old, what they called a beanbag ashtray. It went over the edge of the ear, and molded to it, and got an ashtray. And somehow, I don't know if it was smoking or whatever, but I said, man, that's it, but maybe an ice bag, that was okay. So we went to the Disney people and said, let's build an ice bag. And they thought about it, and said, man, it's not the image we're looking for. Headache. We don't think that's what we want. Nick Walker was great. Nick was incredible. And he showed people up. Bruce Nauman, Hockney, I forget who else, really good artists. He showed a lot of really smart artists. And he had a feel for it. He was smart. That's when you get the biggest thing. We got in through art extension courses at UCLA, and the guy there that was the king was Walter House. I mean, he was an artist. He didn't do art, but he took it to a place where that was his life. He lived with artists. He supported artists. He made Ferris happen. A good example, the support system. He needed keynote sale. This was the great trader of all time. You knew when you traded with him, you were going to lose, but it was fun to do it. And everyone knew it, the other artists knew. He had to get him. He was amazing. But very easy. You'll start the gallery. And every love came. Walter just kept moving on and doing his thing. He did advice for like the Weissmans. He built up their collection. People used, other people who didn't do it, they didn't get anywhere near the collection. Walter was the genius. Well, Los Angeles is a good place to live, so between the weather and the light, people usually need light. And some people say that's the basis of art, what you do with light. But it just wasn't enough here that they could live. And all of a sudden it seems, because there were so many of them, we figured out there's a way. And if there wasn't a way, there was suffering. A lot of other people who didn't have the way. So it was okay because you weren't on your own. I think it happened slowly because of the fact it wasn't a traditional way. It happened very slowly, and there was always this conversation about Los Angeles being a major city. And the one thing that was absolutely true, we were the gateway to the Orient. So Asia was the future in some way. Japan was going crazy, and China wasn't, but it is now. It's one of the things that Gemini, we were able to do the things that the artists wanted. I can't ever remember saying no. There was never a project that we couldn't do. There was one where one of the artists had photographs of a nude girl and stepping over it and looking up the crotch, and we thought, that isn't exactly. I'll tell you, there were a couple we didn't do, and that's part of that lesson. We went back to see Edward Hopper, who was still alive, and he was in Washington Square. And he said, I forget who got us the invitation. And he was nice, his wife was there. And he said, I wasn't there, my partner was, but I know what happened. I told him, you don't want to do one painting a year. He died about a year later. And he said, I just this, but he said, if you want to take some of these plates and restrike them, that'll be okay. He said, no, that's not what we do. But we should have really done it, and maybe he put his hand on a restrike plate or something would have turned him on a little. So that was one that we didn't complete. The other one was Warhol, who we did one of the best things he ever did, Walt McGovern, the picture Nixon offset with. It's just a great thing. I should put it up here somewhere. And McGovern, we were at Bill Burr was doing a show here at LACMA. He was staying at our house. We were doing a party for him at a place on Santa Monica Boulevard. And everyone was there. Allen Ginsberg, Phil Glass, all these people from that time. And someone sticks their head in looking for the place, and it's McGovern. Oh, the world. These are McGovern people. So, but anyway, Warhol did this Walt McGovern. And then he didn't need fine printing. He just, in fact, he told me to get away from that. It wasn't his style. We weren't kind of doing, but we were always friendly with him. He traded with us for the Americans, and we traded him some stuff. It was his idea, not ours. He wanted something of Liechtenstein's or something. So we were seeking him out. It was a good lesson because the Velvet Underground was in town, and he was sponsoring them. And they were at a place on Sunset Boulevard. So we went to see him, and we kind of knew Lou Reed a little bit because he was part of a scene that we were familiar with in New York. A little bit, we weren't friendly with him, but we knew who he was. And there was Nico and I forget who else was part of the Velvet Underground. So we got to hear him. They weren't my favorite because at that time I thought the transitional groups were all David Bowie, who was very intelligent, and I forget, there were a couple of people like that. But we got to see him, and he was there, and Andy was all, we had a party for him, and we did, the first museum show we did was in Pasadena. We did cows, and we did the party here. And so we knew him, and he was always friendly. I mean, if you walked up to him, yes, everything was very, yes, yes, yes. So he said, "You're going to do a project with you, Andy." Oh, yes, yes, yes. We'd seen him a few times in New York. Yes, yes, yes. Well, come on, let's do something. He said, "You know what? Give me a stone, and I'll take it with me, and I'll touch it, and I'll do things to it." He said, "That's not what we had, quite what we had in mind. We were schmucks." What we had in mind. So those are some projects that didn't happen because of our failure of insight. But there were the ones you're talking about, are the ones that an artist could have done, was thinking about, and didn't do. Most of our artists, I'd say it was more Allen Ruppersberg, which we helped him get things done. The Alice Grand Hotel and the Alice Cafe. We weren't as involved in the Alice Cafe, we were involved in the Grand Hotel. Well, to rent the place, financially, help make it happen. It would have happened otherwise, but this way it happened more the way he wanted it to happen. So those happened, but those were projects that were special projects. Because I was thinking is most people were doing things that were inside the art world. We tried to help. I helped Chris Bergman on his big wheel to help him with. I think he had found the wheel, but we found the bearings for him, some of the things to set it up, and because with the forklift business, it was easy to kind of have access, and I knew just enough to be dangerous to be able to figure out how to help. So it was a help on that, and he did it. But most of the people that we were working with, whether it was painting or sculpture, as much as it seemed different, was rather traditional. They weren't doing projects of big projects that I can think of, but I'm sure we thought hard enough about something like that. wasn't a lot of that. Al was doing that. But most of them were not thinking of things that were aside from a museum or a gallery. It gets so much in your brain that that's what art's. Photographer, we may have helped a little with some things there. And the people like Rauschenberg and the Starnes twins just made it so photograph was just another image. You didn't even think about it being anything but another piece of material. So that was a very, I think Keller's probably played some part of it. I have a feeling in the history that played some part in that, where photography just became integrated and became certainly the step from black and white to color. You got the old traditional ones. They didn't want any of that fancy stuff. You always kind of pick an appropriate thing to do in a place that it was kind of like Daniel Buran, who can pick an appropriate thing to do. It's amazing how you figure it out. This was stripes. Those stripes. So it was a lesson to everyone. You don't have to use anything fancy. Yeah, he always lived with us when we shared a loft with him in Tribeca. We had a loft together in Whitman for 35 years. When Tribeca was so quiet, there wasn't even a restaurant down there. Nothing. And so he was always in America, but he never did that much here. And that was the problem that LACMA had. So you talk about Maurice, we were starting there. Never could get the curators together that were truly interested in contemporary art. Even though it's a general museum, you didn't expect it, but there was so little going on here, you needed it, and it was a contemporary department. But now with this Frederick Simon Stevens was a team. This woman, Franklin, this woman came, I think. They got two people that could do some real good things. There's not much of a budget, but you figure out how to get it done. Yeah, right before. It was still in Expo Park. G.E.L. was the guy at Conklin. So when I joined, boy, he was the hardest. We had John Cage came in. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He was really good. And so we happened to have a good one. We didn't have a place at that time. So the council was there. But that's the time we bought the early French Stella. We bought some really good pieces for the museum. Some of the best pieces came from the council getting together and buying them. That's always been its role. Then it was the Contemporary Art Council. And then they decided, because Maurice really called the modern contemporary, go back a little further to have the whole 20th century in a sense. So it kind of watered it down a little in one way, but it still kept its focus on contemporary art. It just didn't have the proper curators to give it guidance. Well, our first young talent awards were given to people who were willing to stay here. So you gave them, it's very little, like $2,000 or something. It was enough to pay rent for a year. Maybe $1,000. If rent was $70 a month. So you send them, will you stay in Los Angeles for a year? I think pretty much they all did. They said yes, and they did. Maybe one or two exceptions. So it was about people working here would stay here. That helped a little to try to encourage them to stay here. There were people like Chris Whitman who never left.